Oh, everybody, welcome to another live stream. We're going to be reacting to some videos, and it's been some time since I've done these live reaction videos. It's been a while, so we will be looking at two in particular direct path teachers who will be addressing Neo-Advaita, or what we call Pseudo-Nonduality. Sorry, Pseudo-Nonduality on this page. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be reacting to it. We will be taking a look at that. If you have any questions, you may write it in the chat. You may also uh, share your opinions, share things that you may disagree with me on. It's absolutely fine to do that. So, it'd be really good if you can. So while I get that started, let's get this set up. And at least what I'll do is I'll get this set up and then we shall begin. Right. And we can do that. Nice. Okay. Oh, okay. Guess this doesn't want to do that for me. Okay. Right. So yeah. Right. So I'm gonna make sure I can hear this well. Okay. It sounds pretty good from my end. And let's get this rolling. So yes, a few things. I hope everyone enjoyed yesterday's podcast episode. It was quite a joy to record and talk about Sri Anandamayi Ma. She's a great mystic, a great teacher to learn from. Somebody that was just a joy to look into the teachings. And as always, it's never easy to approach a teacher and just be able to flow in that devotion or gyan that she was giving. So the wisdom that she shared was pretty epic. So yeah, it's nice to see that. I mean, it was just nice to have recorded that, and most of all, just contemplating on my own thoughts about Sri Anandamayi Ma and the whole aspect of what it means to be a guru. And I think for her, she was someone that was very involved. There is a book, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a book by one of her devotees that is worth looking into. So I definitely would recommend that you check this out. Um, so right now, what we'll be looking at is Rupert Spira's video first, and his take on suffering and Neo-Advaita. This is an interesting conversation because he has to deal with this person and deal with their kind of questions or maybe even misunderstanding. So that's an interesting take. And so yeah. So yeah, let's go on to this. Let's listen.
I really like that you say that you don't agree with the Buddhist, I think it's the Buddhists who say there was never any suffering.
Did I ever say that I didn't agree with that?
I'm sure you did.
Did I? Okay.
Okay, well, you've just cancelled my question.
No. Just remind me what I said,
Okay,
that I don't agree with
the statement that there was never any suffering because there was never anybody to suffer. Do you agree with that or not?
Yes and no.
That's my question, because
Okay.
when you say that King Lear never existed, it seems to me you're saying exactly the same thing.
Yes. One has to be very careful making a statement like this. So I may have said, and it's important not to take what I say out of context. I always try to provide the context for what I say, but sometimes I don't provide the context. I rely on people's understanding. So it is possible that at some time in the past, in response to someone's question, which I may have intuited was founded rather superficially on the belief there's nobody here, there's nothing to do, there's no one to suffer. In order to push that person a little deeper and more honestly into their experience, I may have said, no, get real. You suffer. People suffer. So in that case, I would not be agreeing with the Buddhist statement, there is no suffering, there is no one to suffer. But it's only in particular context that I would have said that. The next day someone may ask a question, and in their question they may give a long story as to why they are suffering. And I might say to them, well, instead of being involved with the story, the apparent cause of your suffering, or even your suffering itself, investigate the person who suffers, the I that is lonely, sad, ashamed, unlovable, guilty, etc. And if you look for that I, that limited, temporary, finite center of consciousness, you'll never find it. So, in other words, that there is no...
So, yeah. Hey, Martin. Hi, Martin G. Nice to see you. So here we see straight away Rupert kind of acknowledging that he would never say something like there's nobody suffering. And even if he did, there would be a background understanding that he would expect that other people will understand. The other thing that tends to happen, and I think I mentioned this with one of Sadhguru's videos, that sometimes there can be a snippet of a whole talk, and where there might have been substance in the whole talk, the snippet may either mislead someone or may not give the whole context. So the only reason why I think with Rupert it tends to be fine is because the videos tend to be longer and you tend to hear the question and then you hear the answer. With Sadhguru, you get the same, but you can kind of tell there's been a choppy editing process. But that's not saying that he might not have answered the question later, which they don't present in the full video. With Rupert, I think he understands, so he answers it in that way. Even when that lady's kind of diminished the whole, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask this question, you've already answered it, or, it makes my question irrelevant. He doesn't allow that to be felt with that lady to keep that feeling ongoing. So these are the little things you notice from really decent teachers and people who really understand the impact of their messaging and the impact of their videos. That it's not just them attending a retreat or a talk in person, but there's a big reverberation that occurs throughout. So very cool by Rupert. Rupert is one of my favorite non-dual teachers, because as much as people dislike the fact, and I can even show you the comments, so some of them do not like the fact he doesn't acknowledge Hinduism or Advaita Vedanta. And I don't think he should either, because well, he kind of does acknowledge it. At the same time, he acknowledges his part of the direct path by Sri Atma Krishna Menon. So he's very real in that sense. But yeah, anyway, we'll go back a bit so we can refer back. But like I said, give me your comments, chat, give me your opinions when you're listening on the go, because I'll then revisit the comments. But yeah, be open in sharing what you feel. This is a safe space where we discuss Neo-Advaita, and not like completely diminishing Neo-Advaita, by the way. We don't we see it for what it is rather than giving a rosy picture of it, which is the case. But yeah, let's get back to Rupert. And I do like Rupert's shirt. It's pretty cool.
Temporary, finite center of consciousness, you'll never find it. So, in other words, that there is no, once we understand and feel that there is no separate self, that the separate self is only a temporary limitation.
Again, this is where it's key on it's actually an Advaita Vedanta teaching, where he says there's no separate self. So he's not diminishing selfhood. He's saying there's a self, and he uses the word experience and feel that there is no separate self. These are the lines where you know there has been already a foundation of traditional Advaita, which you don't hear from any of the Neo-Advaita teachers, because they would say there's no feeling, there's no teaching, there's no experience. But he's not saying this. He's saying there has the experience of feeling as there is no other separate self is the experience. So we have to understand very subtle points, and that's a problem, I think, with Rupert, is that he's incredibly subtle and nuanced in his language, and simple, that it can be missed. He can be misunderstood in many ways, but in my opinion, he's a great teacher.
A temporary and ultimately illusory limitation of the true and only self of infinite, unconditionally happy awareness, then we can say there is no suffering and there is no one to suffer. So these two statements, there is suffering and our suffering is very real, and the statement, there is no suffering and the person who suffers is illusory, is also true. They're both true. I'm not allowed to use the analogy of John Smith and King Lear anymore, so...
It's if anyone knows Rupert, he always uses the example of King Lear and John Smith, which is actually a pretty cool analogy. I know a lot of people have issues with it, but it's actually pretty cool. But the other thing that he says, that he doesn't actually diminish suffering, and he understands that both levels are true. And this is true from the Advaitic principle of the ultimate level and transactional level. So you'll have the relative level where suffering feels real, and then at the same time on the ultimate level, Brahman within and without, that is the only prevailing thing, is not suffering. And that this illusory self that we've created by misidentification or a limitation or temporary limitation in consciousness, we take that to be real, and therefore our suffering feels real. So it's, again, very nuanced points, but I particularly like what Rupert is saying.
So I have to say that the first statement, that there is suffering and there is someone who suffers, is true of the policeman. The second statement, there is no suffering for there is nobody to suffer, is true of the naked man. So it depends on whose behalf we are speaking. Both statements are true. Does that answer your question? Not quite.
Yeah, it answers the question. It's just there's something in me always rebels against that, because of course we see so much unspeakable suffering in the world, and it's there. There is suffering happening.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes. As people, we suffer under.
Again, small points, but this shows the importance of acknowledging suffering, which makes it clear that he's not Neo-Advaita, which he has been accused of. This just subtle point diminishes that whole image. And it's actually not quite subtle, actually. It's pretty much on the cuff. So yeah. And other thing, it's very important that a teacher understands, which I don't see, and Martin, you can also talk about this. I don't see any of the Neo-Advaita teachers or Pseudo-Nondual teachers actually do this thing of understanding that an answer is not being resonated with the student or with the other participant or the friend, as Rupert would refer them as. That is something important as well, because one should acknowledge that and understand and observe someone's body language to see if the answer is meeting their expectations. I have been in conversations with people where I've asked a question, received the answer. It's obvious I have not liked the answer. I have not resonated with the answer, but they never, but they don't see my body language, and they just want to get to their point and then leave. I don't think that's a good thing to do. But with Rupert, what I like is he's guessed it. He could have ended it there, to be honest. He didn't have to continue. He could have ended it there and moved on to the next question. But what a good teacher knows is that if he doesn't address the doubt now, it's going to grow. And instead of it growing to a place where that person can never look back from that doubt, it's best to address the actual doubt itself, and then see whether the answer is being fully understood. If not, find another way to answer it. That was something that's like some teachers, even though you don't see it in the transcripts that they do, but there might have been that interaction already being played. But yeah, but so far so good from Rupert. I like Rupert, and we're going to look at Francis Lucille after, who was actually Rupert's teacher. And Francis is a pretty nice guy as well. It's his first video that I'd be reacting to, but yeah, so far I really liked what Rupert has said.
Undeniably, and it would be facile to deny that.
That's it. Yeah.
And that's why I would never, that I don't just automatically answer every question about suffering with, well, there's no suffering because there's no person to suffer. That sounds like the non-dual teaching. But if that answer is just given mechanically to every question about suffering. It betrays the fact that
Yes.
the teaching is not really coming from understanding. It's just coming from a series of non-dual.
That's what I always say on my channel, and it's something that people don't understand. As you'll see, when we've reacted to the big shots in the Neo-Advaita or Pseudo-Nondual circles or Ego-Advaita, what we find is they don't understand this sort of point of you have to show compassion, you have to show understanding, and how you react to someone, how you respond to someone says everything. Now, if someone comes to me or to anyone and or a friend comes to you and they're totally in agony, you're not going to turn around to them and say, well, there's nobody here to be antagonized. There's no one here that's in agony, or there is no suffering. That is an immature response. The mature response is this: you have to first address the person where they are right now before you can take them to the ultimate level. You have to address them on the transactional, the relative reality, then take them to the ultimate reality, take them to that place where there is only Brahman. That is the ultimate understanding. But yeah, I mean, Rupert is pretty much hitting the nail on the head. And unfortunately, for the people that like to call him a Neo-Advaita teacher, that is the sign. And he even does not call it Advaita. He calls it non-duality, kind of maybe respectfully so, but I think he should have made a distinction. That's the only criticism I may have. He may do that in the future, in the rest of the video. We have another 15 minutes left, but from what I see, more could have been. He could be a bit more direct about that, since he's on the direct path.
About suffering, it betrays the fact that the teaching is not really coming from understanding. It's just coming from a series of non-dual concepts that have been learned in satsang or on YouTube or in a book. That's not the real non-dual teaching. The non-dual teaching is free from any prescription to any set of ideas, and will.
I'm going to come back to that. Yeah, you should have said Ego-Advaita or Ego-Nonduality. I would have had that. So okay, so hear me out on the bit that he says here about the lack of prescription. Like there shouldn't be a prescribed answer. I agree with him to an extent. There should not be a prescribed answer. We should. There should be okay. There should be the ultimate answer. Hey, Jas, G, how are you? Hope you're doing well. There should be a prescribed answer, but after you've given your prescribed answer, take a look where the person is, and then set the kind of the little nuance and changes and the little kind of tweaks to the answer accordingly. You'll always give the one answer, but you'll find 10 different ways to find it. I agree with him that there shouldn't be a prescribed answer, but then at the same time, I would say you need some prescription of an answer. Lots of love to you too, G. So you do have to do that. It's really important that I think you should have a prescribed answer. But I think what he's trying to say is if someone has a genuine problem, there's no point giving them the big speak. Like, for example, if I just turn around to people and say, there's only the formless awareness, therefore you should not be feeling the anxiety that you're feeling or the pain that you're feeling, or if I just say, listen to my podcast and all your illnesses will be solved. No, someone may not need that answer. We need to ensure that there is a very sophisticated answer to everything. So for me, Rupert does have that sophistication, which is why I like him as a teacher. I really admire him. And I know that from what I've seen of him, I've also attended his webinars in the past. I haven't attended any recently because they tend to happen on a Sunday and I'm busy on Sundays. And then Thursdays, it tends to be in conflict with work. But I've seen him and I've seen how he interacts with people, and he's genuine. And every answer is different. He will never give the same answer to a question that will always be similar, that people may ask. So I give him credit for that. The other one who does that is obviously my favorite, Swami Silvapriyanandaji. But yeah, hi, Spiritual Samurai. I hope you're doing well. He's also known as the Vedic Oracle on TikTok. You went to his retreat once, so I remember we chatted about that. The entire thing was a play on the philosophy. In the end, I came with nothing and left with nothing, lol. He's a genuine and kind person. Yeah, I don't know if he leaves you with nothing. If you went with nothing and you left with nothing, I don't know if that's a play on words, but I don't really feel that from him. I feel that there is what he's been offering recently. Uh, Obviously, I think you met him years ago, so you may have been right, and I think he even has acknowledged that he is kind of evolved himself in more recent times. But the stuff that he's doing today with consciousness studies is admirable. Him and Swami Silverbreen, and the best people on who are mixing Advaita Vedanta and showing how it's a credible science and explanation for consciousness, which a lot of the kind of spiritual institutions in India are not doing. They're not interested in that. They're more interested in possibly other things, like some may be more interested in more doing social work. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's good. Sadhguru does that a lot, and I admire his efforts in that. I just question the results of that. But otherwise, that's one thing that he does. But he also has this element of going within, so there's that strong sense. But to really actually make Advaita Vedanta a credible explanation for consciousness, you have to be with the bigwigs in academia and with the philosophers of the West. So that's something that Rupert has been doing, Swami Silverbreen, and they're doing. And that's something that the ego Advaita teachers or the pseudo-non-dual teachers are never going to do. So yeah, let's see what he continues to say. But yeah, Rupert G's doing pretty good. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Spiritual Samurai, what you're saying is particularly correct. How many people actually do want moksha? How many people do want mukti? How many people actually want freedom? That's a question that I would say even people that claim those things don't really want it, because to be free is literally to accept your own death in a way. And I don't think everyone is mentally prepared for that, and neither should they be. Like, everyone has their own journey to get there. But when you mention the ego trip, I understand what you're talking about, and I don't think that's just with him, as you mentioned. I think it's generally the thing that's in the spiritual community. I find that people are there for the ego trip. Either they're there for power or recognition, or to be like, oh yeah, look how holy I am. I'm attending a retreat, and I'm going to a satsang, or to a webinar, or a Zoom meeting. It's a lot more than that. One needs to, and this is exactly the point that Rupert is talking about here, is that you have to acknowledge what is actually happening in your life before you go to more towards the spiritual thing. But yeah, liberation is not the thing for everybody. That's a thing. A lot of people, they like the sense of community. They like the sense of being in a group, and they like, sometimes they just like to listen to good thoughts. It's a welcome kind of, it's a welcome space for their mind in the week. But yeah, it's not, So liberation, it's a very serious thing, but yet it's the most playful thing to go with. So it's both serious and playful, you know. Um, Theo got enlightened when he crossed the road without looking left or right. He nearly, yeah, but he was about to be liberated from the form of Theo, but not looking left or right. So in a way, there was liberation occurring. Um, so yeah. Right, let's have a look at what more Rupert G's gonna say.
Free from any prescription to any set of ideas, and will one moment say, yes, there is suffering, your suffering is very real, and 5 minutes later may say, no, there is ultimately no suffering, because the one who suffers is not who he thinks he really is. So I think one has to be very cautious, particularly in these days when the teaching no longer takes place as it used to 100 years ago or 200 years ago, in closed communities, small closed communities that grow up around the teacher, where most of the people are long-term students or devotees. So there is a kind of, it's not necessary to build the teaching up from scratch in relation to every answer, because the small group around the teaching, they already have the basics, so the teaching doesn't need to go pedantically through every step. Things are different now. A teacher says something and 10 minutes later it's on YouTube, available to millions of people. So I feel that a teacher has to move with the times and be responsible.
Wow, that's a big statement to make, and an interesting one. So first of all, Rupert G, he obviously lays the foundation of what the answer should be and how it is. He then gives the previous response where he's absolutely right. 100, 200 years ago, maybe even more so in the ancient times with the rishis, it was a close-knit community, small ashrams. And anyone that's been watching my videos or where I've been a guest, well, I talked about it this week on my podcast because when I was looking at Sri and then my ma, I observed that she had a very close-knit community. And because of that closeness, her devotees had grown, not grown in numbers, but in quality. So that is something to look at. The other thing to look at, which is very important, and what I've done when I've been a guest on podcasts, I've been very open because some people, they call you a teacher. They see that you do a few videos on YouTube, and they think that you must be a teacher. And I, as you know, I don't like being called a teacher, so I kind of I refrain from being called it. And what I give is the alternative of what I see as better. As in, now I think spiritual organizations need to scale down. They need to allow splinter groups to occur. They need to allow for, I mean, my biggest thing is, and this is something we mentioned here on the live streams, is that have a look how many gurus the guru has created. If it's zero, it's not good enough. Or how many people have they elevated to the same level of the guru? So they may not be called the guru, but they're on the same level. So that's something. And also, how much can your teaching impact people if you're constantly going back to square one? This is where I feel that game has to be played a little in today's day and time, as Rupert G said, with the whole thing on YouTube. You do have to go back, but then you can go cautiously and be responsible. So by me adding in the beginning of any time I speak from the ultimate level, I do have to give the caveat always of the transactional reality, the relative reality. The fact that, yes, although there is only the Nirgun Brahman, essentially there is no persona called Rahul or whoever, or whatever your name may be. But the thing is, if, say, someone tomorrow is watching this on YouTube who's new to Advaita, they need to understand that we acknowledge their suffering, but we tell them and we guide them to understand that it's the persona that is feeling the suffering, but the ultimate aspect of who they are and what they truly are, does not feel the suffering. And that requires someone to help you in a small group. It shouldn't grow. One of the reasons why on my Patreon there's the top one where there's, which I think is for like $150. That is for like the serious seekers, and I think there's a limit to how much I put on there. And those would be the people that I will constantly interact with. And you have to do that, I think, in today's day and time, is to make sure you don't stray from just giving general spiritual advice. I think if you give general spiritual advice, you're giving nothing. That's my personal opinion. You might as well just close down your shop and just, yeah, I don't see any point in it. But the specialized answers to a seeker's question or to a fellow friend or fellow traveler is more important. So, yes. So let's see. The interesting thing is that his retreat wasn't a silent retreat, in saying that you got to see a lot of Maya of the participants. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, if you've been to, I mean, let me put it this way: there will always be Maya around a teacher. There will always be Maya around a spiritual organization. That is something that cannot be escaped, in my opinion. But how the teacher responds to that is the key. That's where you see the genuineness. But yes, and how much the teacher tries to put a stop to that is also, without coming across rude or condescending or anything like that. So I think that's important. But yeah, trust me, I'm sure what you've seen is probably still fine compared to the things I've seen. There's no greater Maya shown than from devotees from India, trust me. When they want to flaunt their wealth, they will flaunt their wealth and status and power and prestige. So yeah, and frankly, um, I think Rupert's most of his people are Western. So yeah, the Maya will be there, but trust me, it's not going to be as bad. But your next comment is interesting. To realize the self, having a stable sense of self is so important. I absolutely agree. People with mental illnesses do not have that kind of foundation to work from. Yeah, I agree. One of the reasons why it's very important to acknowledge one's pain and suffering. And one of the reasons why, even on as Spiritual Samurai, I don't know if if you've watched my other live streams where we've discussed pseudo-non-duality. But one of the things that we've talked about with a lot of passion is that you need to have a foundation. Two, you need to acknowledge your mental health, and three, you know, how do we live in this transactional world yet remain in that formless awareness at all times? So I think so. We do. So your comment is really on point. Really something I totally agree with. My devotees come from every religion, even Sikhs and Muslims. Yeah, I mean that's something you find in a lot of the mystics in India. It wouldn't surprise me if Nisargadatta Maharaj had Muslim devotees or and Sikh devotees. I know Osho did. I know J. Krishnamurti did. So uh, Tony Parson has got a new video. That's going to be my new evening entertainment. I hope that's enjoyable. Good luck for that. I remember it was a retreat in the USA. Nobody was from the community in itself. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I'm with you. Like I understand the Maya thing, but trust me, the Indian ex, presentation of Maya. Oh my god, it's really something else. But yeah, let's get back to Rupert's messaging. Really liked what he said. Really on point. Small group is easier, but now we are on YouTube. We're on TikTok. We have to understand that we're going to have to keep going back to square one. And it is, as you said, pedantic. It's annoying. It's irritating. Trust me. The amount of times that on TikTok, when I talk about non-duality and on that I'm a Hindu, they'll ask me, why do you have 33 million gods? What about the caste system? They'll always ask these same questions again and again. But the joy is that what can happen by me answering the questions, I can trigger someone's journey into finding out more about Hinduism, about Vedanta, and actually a few Muslims, they even contact me afterwards to say that my responses to them have been respectful, and they end up following me, and they end up, sometimes liking videos and videos which I don't expect them to like, but they do. So it's, one has to look at the broader picture and see. So yeah, sometimes things are annoying, but that's the thing. Sometimes we may get a new person come in the chat and not understand what we're talking about. Again, we have to be compassionate and understand that it may be new to them. So actually, the people that have spoken to me aren't Sufis, but Sufis do tend to be more open-minded, but they're not Sufis. So yeah, but yeah, let's get back to this.
To understand that things are different now. If one makes a statement like that, one has to qualify it.
Yeah, it seems to me when you just said now, the one who suffers is not who he or she thinks he or she is. Yeah, that's different than saying there's nobody to suffer.
That's right.
That's the nuance.
Yes, you see, you're absolutely right. We often hear on the Neo-Advaita circuit as such.
Okay, my man got there. He got there. I was wondering when was he going to mention Neo-Advaita, because it's on the title of the video. So I was kind of surprised where he just mentioned non-duality. But it's true. I've actually heard some traditional Advaita teachers say the same things as the Neo-Advaitas or the Pseudo-Nondualists. I've heard them say the same thing. So I kind of know where Rupert's coming from, but I'm glad now he's made the distinction.
A question, a statement such
Yeah,
as
circuit.
There's no.
I think he wanted to call it circus, but he wanted to be nice, so he said circuit.
Neo-Advaita circuit as such, a question, a statement such as there's nobody here.
Oh, my man's going for it.
There's nothing here. This is, of course, nonsense.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to explain. Because this is precisely one of those statements that if it went out onto YouTube without being explained, could give the wrong impression. So I now have to explain what I mean by that. Let's say...
Again, I'll always say this. Traditional teachers, the real deals, will always have a sense of responsibility. And this is what, I mean, this automatically makes him so different. So yeah, there's nothing here, just circus happening. If nobody's here, then there isn't any work to do. That's what they always say. That's what they always say.
The one who says there is nobody here is called... Now I have to be really careful. I have to think of a name that doesn't relate to anybody that I know or have ever heard of.
See, now that's a difficult one, Rupert. You're gonna, let's see what name he comes up with, because I'm sure now you probably have a lot of common names that are pseudo-non-dual teachers.
Help me out. Ollie. I don't know anyone called Ollie, thank you. Okay, well, let's say that someone here called Ollie is a Neo-Advaita teacher and gives meetings, and that the basic message is there's nobody here and there's nothing to do. So that's fine. We carry on with our conversation here, and then halfway through the meeting, at the back of the room, Naya walks in to the room and says, sorry to disturb you all, but is anyone called Ollie here? Ollie puts up his hand. Now, why does Ollie put up his hand and none of the rest of us? If there was nothing there that related to the word Ollie, Ollie would not put his hand up. But Ollie does put his hand up, and none of us put our hands up. There is something there to which the word Ollie refers, and it is in that person's experience alone. So if Ollie then deals with the emergency, comes back, starts talking with his friends, and just says, there's nobody here, it's nonsense. It's true that what is essential to the person Ollie, what Ollie considers to be himself, is not limited by the thoughts, the feelings, the activities and relationships that pertain to that particular body-mind. But nevertheless, there is a self, if we can call it a self. There is something that Ollie refers to when he says I. Now, Ollie, this I, the self of Ollie, may recognize that it has no limits, and therefore it is not limited to the body and the mind of Ollie, but nevertheless there is something there that says yes when his name is called. What is it that says, when you hear the name Ollie, he says, yes, I am here. What is it that says that? It is consciousness. That is what is really there. Even when Ollie says, Ollie the Neo-Advaita says, there is nobody here.
So I just think that you could really beautifully make a cartoon out of that. Ollie the Neo-Advaita or Neo-Advaitin.
Ollie the Neo-Advaita says, there is nobody here. What does he mean by the word here? When he says here, he means this location. Well, that's what the separate self is, a location of consciousness. So to say there is nobody here is a contradiction of terms. If there was nobody, there would be no here. There would be nothing located here. So to say there is nobody here is simply a contradiction of terms. There is something or someone that seems to be located here, and that is what we call our self. And our self seems to be located in, and as a result, to share the limits and the destiny of this body. So if we make a deep investigation of that self, we find that none of the limits of our thoughts and perceptions actually pertain to that self. So there is something which is not a thing that is present, and it is essentially unlimited, and it is the self of all selves. But nevertheless, it is apparently located here for as long as we are embodied.
First time the word apparently has been used properly. Because apparently it tends to be their, or the apparent tends to be their favorite word that the pseudo-non-dualists use. But Rupert's answer pretty much on point. Nothing for me to add on other than that is pretty awesome what he said. A very good explanation of how to understand how you can understand your shared being, yet be localized in this. You can understand you are the consciousness in all, yet still be in the understanding that you are limited in the localization of that consciousness. That doesn't mean that location is always in consciousness, because consciousness is all pervading and is literally everywhere. So yes, just use Jim as an example. Yeah, Jim would be a better one to use. Ollie, sorry, I was going to say Jim must exist for the I to exist. Yes, Ollie, yep, I agree. No Ollie, no I, therefore nothing exists. People must differentiate mind and consciousness. Yes, I agree. That's actually really important, to differentiate between mind and consciousness, or persona and consciousness. Ollie is the center of everything within itself. He must exist in order to be the seer. Yes, the seer and the seen. Absolutely agree.
So we have to be very careful making statements such as, there is no suffering, there's nobody here, there's nothing to do. They seem to be non-dual statements, and they can be statements of the ultimate truth, as far as it is possible to make a statement of the ultimate truth. But I feel one should be very cautious saying such things, especially nowadays when anything that anybody says is shared so rapidly in the media, where people don't have the context or the understanding with which to fully understand these statements, and therefore they are nearly always mistaken. And this brings the non-dual teaching into disrepute and dumbs it down.
Yes.
And
Oh, here we go. That's the end of that video. So we'll start with Francis's video. But yeah, Rupert on point with everything he has said. I think personally, I agree with him. We have to be careful about what we say. Being non-dualist, that's very important. His last point, I wanted to play that again. Oh yeah. So when these people, these Neo-Advaitins, they say these statements and they say it with such authority, it leads, it makes non-duality such a difficult one. Once they, okay, let me make this clear. Say somebody approaches a pseudo non-dualist, they get in touch with the messaging. Then what happens is they understand it somewhat intellectually, and they see and they can understand there is an element of truth behind the teachings of there's no one here, or there's no self here, there's no being here, there's nobody suffering, there's nobody seeking, there's nobody reading scriptures, there is no scriptures, there's no consciousness, there's no awakening, there's no enlightenment, there's it's all an apparent happening. Although those may seem like great statements, uh, as if they're trying to be Mahavakyas of the Upanishads, they're just simply not. And the point is that once somebody hears that whose mind has not had the foundation to understand, they will then end up questioning this, because all you need is one bad moment in their life to make that teaching come crashing down. And when I say teaching, the apparent teaching of non-duality will come crashing down. And then what happens is they then become disoriented. They then start saying non-duality is completely false. And when people start seeing that statement of non-duality being completely false, they then think that Advaita Vedanta is false, and or Buddhist non-duality is false. Because even when it comes to Buddhist non-duality, when they say there's no self, there's a whole system in place before you get to that point of realization. And it's the same realization eventually as Advaita Vedanta. Just the semantics are different, but ultimately it's pointing to the same ultimate truth. So, and that's why, people may be like, oh, why do you react to videos like that? Leave them alone. Or one, they shouldn't be offended because there's nobody there, one, reacting to the video, and there's nobody's video that I'm reacting to. If they really followed their teachings and their sayings and their pointings, whatever they call it. But I just find that I see the consequences, and it's not. And if you don't call it out, you more or less are complicit in it. So I think that's why it's very important to see Rupert speak out about it. Now we're going to go to our friend Francis Lucille. Try and get his video up. But yeah, let me have a look at some of the comments. Thank you for the comments. There's just unattaining. Oh, I don't even know what that means. Oh, it's such a, I don't know. The Neo-Advaita is really giving me a headache. There was a really good video of Francis Lucille where he talks about Neo-Advaita. Okay. So let me get that. I've got it up. Okay. Let me share the screen. Let me look at the comments. It contradicts itself and then people abandon ship. Yep, that's the sad thing. Nobody at any end makes being a living being meaningless. Yep, exactly. Right. Okay. Right. Let me just quickly go and turn my light on, so it doesn't. I don't lose the quality in the video. And then I'll be back. Just 1 second. Right, I'm back, and we're gonna now listen to Francis Lucille. He's Rupert's teacher. One of Rupert's teachers, I would say, now a good friend. So yeah, so let's listen to him. Oh yeah, I just remembered something about Rupert's video. It it would have been quite funny if Rupert turned around and said there was no fly here. I mean, there's obviously a fly that was obviously kind of going towards his face and kind of trying to disrupt the talk. I can imagine a Neo-Advaita being like really being critical about that and like seeing it as like some divine play, but then yeah, just I just feel that it was a perfect metaphor that Neo-Advaita or Pseudo-Nonduality is like a fly that's annoying in the traditional Advaita teachings. It's like that annoying thing that's always present. But yeah. No offense to flies, by the way.
Good afternoon, Francis. I've heard the term Neo-Advaita mentioned from a number of sources, and I don't understand what it is. Could you explain that?
I think I coined the term.
I heard Rupert use it also.
Yeah, but you know.
Yeah.
I guess the term was successful. I mean, the main difference, I refer to Neo-Advaita when it's not traditional Advaita. It means it's a teacher who didn't basically have a teacher. Or it doesn't mean, so that's one thing. The other thing is about it that it is also a form of Advaita in which basically, but I think if you look online, you will find a lot of comments on this topic. So, and I'm not responsible for those. But in my mind, it was a way to make a distinction between Advaita that comes from a tradition and Advaita that comes from understanding by people who, it may be through a book, it may be without a book, who have come to the same understanding. I think another difference is that in the traditions, the at least in the Advaita tradition I come from, the first glimpse of the truth is not the end of the path. First glimpse of the truth
Yes.
is really the beginning of the path. Before that moment, you are on the path to the path. You are not on the path yet.
This is an important point, just in general about spirituality. People get their first glimpse and they suddenly start thinking they're experts. You got to spend time. And I really like what Francis says, that it's the path towards the path. That's the first glimpse. It's not the end goal. It's not like you've achieved everything now at that point. So I'm with him on that. I really like what he said. No guru because you are the guru. How narcissistic is that? Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, when they do that, when they say there's no teacher, yet they're charging people a lot of money, it is narcissism. It really is.
Often, those who have come to that through their own means often stop there. And often they begin teaching. So, which begs the question, what is the end of the path in the traditional Advaita? If in the Neo-Advaita, the beginning of the path, the end of the path is a glimpse of the truth, in the best cases. What is the end of the path? And the end of the path in the traditional Advaita is to be established in peace and happiness. So the other distinction that could be made is that sometimes Neo-Advaita is about enlightenment, a glimpse of the truth, a revelation of the truth, whereas Advaita is about happiness. You see? So that's
Okay. So I think I would have a slight disagreement, but it's not so much of a disagreement, there may be choice of words. I would say that actually the end of Advaita is liberation, but saying that, that's what he might mean by peace and happiness. So I'm gonna say that, and yeah, if you're liberated, the natural response is Satchitananda, Ananda meaning ultimate bliss or happiness, or peace. So yeah, I agree with him on that point. Just making that distinction of the liberation aspect, but yeah, he's essentially right. So yeah, it's like being given a flashlight in the dark. Now you can see the path, and that is what the guru does. Exactly. You need somebody to show you that needs to bring, for example, if you go into a cave and there's lots of gold and jewelry around, you won't know without putting the flashlight on. And then it's not just about discovering the gold and the jewels. What you have to do then is pick that jewel up, pick that gold up. After you've seen it with the flashlight, pick it up and then take it to the market and then sell it for the right price. Notice my words, sell it for the right price, meaning find out its true value. Yeah, so it's really important that we do that. And that's the sign of a traditional Advaita, is where there is the recognition of finding out one's true self, discovering one's true self. It's exactly what Francis is saying, really. Yes, unwavering equanimity. Yeah, I mean, yeah, what he's saying is essentially the same thing. I just think that the word moksha, or freedom, or liberation, is kind of important. But I would say that, yeah, um the end goal of being liberated is, like, the feeling that comes along with that is happiness and equanimity, as you mentioned, stillness, joy and ecstasy and peacefulness. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with that, friend Francis.
truth, whereas Advaita is about happiness. You see? So that's another important distinction.
So what you would teach would be, could you call it orthodox Advaita?
No, because orthodoxy has nothing to do with that. Orthodoxy is according to a norm. And here there are no norms. In other words, perhaps somebody would have come to my teacher's teachings and come to me, and then they would say, okay, well, these two guys are very different. These two teachings are very different. Because in an orthodoxy, that which gets transmitted, it's a tradition with a small t. The tradition with a small t are about the methods, the means. The methods of teaching are the means to achieve whatever has to be achieved in the orthodoxy, like happiness after death in a future life. Here, that which gets transmitted is not a method. It cannot be put in a book. It is really causeless, the experience of causeless peace and of causeless happiness.
Okay, so you're saying the same thing.
So it's very simple to establish whether there is, you can call that orthodoxy. You are an orthodox in this tradition if you are at peace and happy without a cause. If you are not, you are what? Heterodox? Or
Some teachers would say, because there is no personal self, there is nobody to be enlightened. Everything is perfection as it is. Therefore, do whatever you want.
yeah, that sounds very much like Neo-Advaita. And I mean, it's fine if you are already happy and at peace. Do whatever you want. Yeah, sure. If your happiness is not dependent in particular of what you do or don't do, about what the universe is doing, then do whatever you want. Or do whatever you can. But if that is not the case, if you are not at peace and happy, it means that you believe to be a separate entity. In which case, the there is nothing to do doctrine doesn't apply. Because you cannot speak from both sides of your mouth. Either it is clear to you, it is your experience that there is no personal entity, in which case it's true, there is nothing to do. But if it seems to be your experience that there is a personal and limited entity, there is something to do. I have news for you. There is something to do, which is to get rid of this belief. That's the best thing you can do. The best thing you can do is to get rid of this belief. Other things people do is...
I just wanted to say, like, he really is... this is a bit more of a stronger message, than Rupert. Rupert was a bit more calmer in his approach. Francis is still calm, but he's a lot more direct, I would say, about what he thinks about that teaching. Also, I love his French accent. I know it's the way hearing Advaita being expressed with a French accent is incredibly awesome. um, but, but yeah, yes, happy and bliss is such a misunderstood concept. Yeah, absolutely. It makes it seem achievable for most people. Yeah, that's the main issue. Militant ego fight. The ego cannot get rid of itself. Your accent is better. I don't know. I like the French accent. I guess we always like accents that are different to ours. But yeah. It's very true. The ego cannot get rid of itself because it's a function, a limited function. It's very easy for us to hear things like, "Oh, there's no ego." Well, there is an ego. You just don't have to identify that is who you are and what you are. That's the difference. Yeah, nothing wrong with the New York accent, you know. So yes, let's get back to this for Francis.
Going into addictions. But that's not the best thing you can do. The best thing you can do is but there is something to do from that vantage point. So the confusion in Neo-Advaita teachings comes from the assumption that the understanding is already there, that there is nothing to do, whereas in fact it's not there. Also, which leads to the following. I mean, the doctrine that comes out of that is, okay, there is nothing to do, and there is nothing you can do, and therefore, if you're unhappy, so be it.
Yeah, there's nothing.
So then the goal is no longer happiness. The goal is you are unhappy, remain as you are, right? So the most interesting question to me is, why do people go listen to such a teaching?
Okay, I was not expecting that, but he's right. Why would anyone want to listen to that type of teaching? What's appealing about it when it's literally saying to you that, yeah, if you're in crisis, so be it. There's nothing for you to do. It's a sharp point. Yeah, that's pretty hard hitting. Who is there to wake up when there is nobody that can be asleep? Exactly. It's, yeah, I really like what Francis said. Really, really awesome.
Why do people go listen to such a teaching? What's the expectation? If the guy is telling them already the goal is not happiness, I mean, the first thing I would say, okay, up yours. You know, it's like you go to someone and to the market, you know, to the farmer's market, and what are you selling? Okay, beautiful tomatoes, fine. And you, what are you selling? Shit. Oh, thank you very much.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow.
No.
I mean, that's direct. That's direct. And yeah, a lot of people they're selling shit and people are buying it in hordes. I'm with him on that.
What is often missed is that it is all about happiness. That's it. It's not about enlightenment. I mean, who cares about enlightenment if you're miserable? And if you're happy, who cares about enlightenment?
Good video by Francis. Yes, I was literally thinking the word contentment as well. Santosh, Suk. Yes. So Francis, brilliant guy, brilliant teaching, brilliant expression. He's the only one I'm gonna be. That's the last video that I'll be reacting to, but absolutely on point with everything that he has said. The thing is, what is so appealing about Ego-Advaita or Pseudo-Nonduality when it doesn't offer you happiness or any teaching? And even enlightenment, what's the point of enlightenment if you're absolutely miserable, absolutely disturbed, or absolutely in conflict? So the real deal is, as you said, is to be content with life, to be at a place where you are just at peace. You're just in that stillness. There's a very beautiful word that Ramana Maharishi used to use, which is to be in sage, to be in that experience of just flowing with life instead of being in conflict with life. Everything is there is a certain beauty to everything. One thing that I will emphasize, and it's why Francis is right, is based on this one point that I'm going to make, which is a strong point. Francis is right because of the saying Satchit Ananda. At the end of the day, the whole point of understanding is that all of existence, the ground of that existence, is pure consciousness. And because of that, there is absolute joy, absolute bliss. That bliss, which is birthless, which is deathless, which is, there's no end to it, there's no beginning to it. It's continuous. It can be accessed at any time. All that requires is for us to understand what our true nature is. That is the key difference. And that's what I liked about Francis Lucille. And the question is, are we happy with taking shit? Or are we actually happy with the real fruits that will bring real nourishment? Or are we just going to keep going back to the nonsense of Neo-Advaita and constantly go towards teachers that give us a quick fix rather than the slow yet enduring maturity that real Advaita brings, the traditional Advaita path brings? Understanding. See, the end goal of the understanding is of the actual point to understand is the same thing. Although there is a slight variation where we will say there is only consciousness or pure awareness. They would say, the pseudo-non-dualists, they would say, well, there's nobody here, therefore there is no consciousness. There is no awareness. The problem with that statement is who is saying such a thing? Who is aware that that teaching or that pointing is not good or is not right? So in the end, they can never deny their own experience. And that's why on this channel, we promote that there should be a traditional understanding of Advaita Vedanta, or shall I just say a traditional understanding of non-duality, and understanding the end goal and the end purpose. The other thing is to understand that there is the true understanding comes from this underlying experience of oneness. Without that underlying experience of oneness, there is no real spiritual growth. And this is something that the pseudo-non-dualists do not understand and do not contemplate upon. So yeah, that's really it. But yes, yeah, as a spiritual samurai, you're absolutely right when you say that it gives someone a false sense of entitlement and superiority over others for those that don't really get it. And you actually see that with the pseudo non-dualists, you do feel that there is a clear division between the teacher and the student, and there's a or disciple. In the traditional sense, that may be there, but it has no issue with that. With the pseudo non-dualist, when you automatically say there's nobody here giving the teaching, nobody here presenting the teaching, nobody here receiving the teaching, well, what is the point of one even recording the video? What is the point of one writing the book or holding a retreat if that is the case? If there's nobody here doing nothing, then to be honest, you can't do anything. Actually, you can't even say to those people to sit at home and do nothing, because that's defeating the purpose of what they're saying. So what they teach and what they present is completely impractical. And we've had two teachers today, two well-respected teachers, express this teaching. I'm going to end it very soon. And then tomorrow, hopefully I'll be on. I'm going to do some different, well, I'm going to react to something, but not on the pseudo non-duality, more towards the Indian philosophy. I want to do more of that. There's some really interesting videos, some interviews that we can even see from other teachers. But yeah, really enjoyed listening to Rupert, Spira, and listening to Francis Lucille. Very great teachers talking about the issues with, Neo-Advaita or Pseudo-Nonduality. We need to listen to what they've said, really implement it, and really, if you're on a platform where you're talking about spirituality or Hinduism or anything, make sure that whatever you say, you understand the gravity of it. You understand with anything you share, you understand the long-term effect of that. And just check within oneself that is one sharing anything out of ego or not. So yes, thank you for being on this live. Thank you, Spiritual Samurai. Thank you to Martin. Thank you, Jas, for adding your views, commenting on here. It really helps with this video. So I really appreciate it. And I love the conversation. So thank you very much. And I shall see you again. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be back on. If you would like to support me on Patreon, make sure you do that. Everything is in the video description below. I do also have one-to-one meetings now, so do check my link in bio. That has everything on there. So yeah, otherwise I shall see you in the next video. Okay, take care everybody, stay safe, bye.